Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is, of course, we're Wednesday, January we have Wednesday, January the 7th here. So with that, I hope everybody's having a good week thus far as we've reached, of course, Hump Day. We're gonna give people a chance to come in before we get started. Friendly reminder to everybody, of course, if you haven't already, if you guys can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage, it'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So we will, so as I said, we will try to, we're waiting on, waiting to see who shows up before we get started, as it were. So with that, so let's see. La 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 la. I need now. I need to go take I need to step away from the computer for a moment. So I'll be right back. I'll put the music on. And I'm back. All right. So it looks like we have some people here now. So, all right. So let's talk about what's on tap for tonight. Got a couple articles I'm going to go over from Bounding into Comics tonight. Um, First, I'm talking about Marvel Comics offering retailer refunds after Ultimate Endgame blind bags cause widespread damage to variant covers. So, wow. That's something. That's not good, especially when your popularity is already kind of taking hits for other aspects. But and then we're gonna also look at a story. Absolute Batman writer says comic book fans are tired of everything being connected to some great ecosystem of TV, movies, a million different things. Which the second story we're going to look at there is kind of a follow up to a story we did last night from Bleeding Fool, talking about why, how and why, you know, how and why, indie comics are outplaying Marvel and DC. Plus, of course, we'll have the wrestling wrap up, in which we'll get all caught up on all the latest in pro wrestling news. Of course, look back to last. There's quite a bit that happened on last night's NXT. We'll be looking at that, looking at some moving and shaking going on in the WWE, as well as looking ahead to tonight's AEW Dynamite. As they continue to march forward towards their next kind of event of Maximum Carnage coming up in a couple of weeks here on Dynamite and Collision. And then we'll of course wrap things up with this day in H history. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Again, a friendly reminder to everybody on both my Rumble and YouTube YouTube viewership. If you guys haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions best of my ability. With that being said, actually, let me do one more thing. I'm going to go off camera here one more time here. I'll be right back. All right, let's get into the material here now. All right, so here's the first article we're going to be looking at here. And this kind of also has an indirect connection to last night's, because this is one of the other issues we talked about in the article. Some of these, some of these sales gimmicks. But anyways, let's get into this. Alrighty then. Marvel Comics offering retailer refunds after Ultimate Endgame, in smaller brackets here, smaller parentheses. Blind bags cause, after Ultimate Endgame blind bag caused widespread damage to variant covers. Article by Spencer Cooley, published back on January 6th, which of course was yesterday. So let's see what's going on here. So, after giving readers even more reason to hate the concept of, in smaller quotes, blind bags, by packaging said editions of Ultimate Endgame in a way that resulted in cover damage to nearly all of its print run, Marvel Comics is thankfully doing the bare minimum to make the situation right and offering retailer refunds for any such blemished covers, provided, of course, they take a rather definitive measure to prevent scalping. Hitting shelves on the final day of 2025 and serving as the first salvo in Earth 6160's climactic showdown with the Maker. Understandably, high sales expectations led Marvel Comics to choose Ultimate Endgame as their flagship attempt to ride the current, in smaller parentheses here, blind bag sales scheme, as pioneered by Image with Invincible Universe, Battle Beast Volume 1, Number 1, and since adopted by other such publishers as IDW, DC, and even noted dependent dependent creator and artist Mark. I don't know if he meant to say independent as opposed to dependent, but somebody might know that more than I think that might be more of an editing issue there. Anything else? Unfortunately, for those who felt compelled to fork over the extra cash for a chance to snag either an exclusive foil variant or a one of a kind artist sketch, including two headshots, each of Doctor Doom and Iron Man, illustrated by MCU's own Robert Downey Jr., many who rolled the dice discovered that the prize inside had been damaged by its enclosing polybag. I guess those are the Iron Man and Doctor Doom adorn Robert Downey Jr. sketch variant covers to Ultimate Endgame. So Marvel themselves have yet to offer any official communication on the matter, despite ever mounting complaints from customers. Bleeding Cool reports that their distributor, Penguin Random House, has reached out to retailers to both acknowledge the issue and offer them restitution for their damaged goods. Quote, "Good afternoon. Thank you for providing the details for your recent claim, and we apologize for the damages you've experienced," unquote, reads their email. As shared by Bleeding Cool, quote, "We've shared the feedback with the publisher, and due to the size of this claim, stripped covers of this quality have been requested to be sent to the Marvel office address below at customer expense. Dan Pedraglia, Marvel, 1290 Avenue of the Americas, second floor, New York, New York, 10104. And for those wondering, quote unquote stripped covers mean wondering quote unquote stripped covers means exactly what you may think, requiring retailers to physically rip the cover off of a given issue in order to send it back to the publisher, as done to avoid undue scalping or loss of value to the limited item. I'm guessing what they're thinking is if somebody somehow intercepted this beforehand and got hold of it, then they could, somebody might try to sell it off for an even cheaper price. At current, it's unclear as to whether Ultimate Endgame shipping woes were the fault of Penguin Random House, Marvel Comics, or one of the many contracted printing houses, as well as whether retailers will receive their refunds in the form of monetary credit or replacement stock. Further, with many still out there to discover, it's unknown just how retailers will be expected to handle the potential discovery of an artist sketch variant while unbagging issues for refunds. And for those curious, in parentheses, and for those curious, as of publication, none have been widely reported as having any relevant damage, unparentheses. And in one final item, it should be explicitly noted that said refunds are only being offered to retailers, meaning any individual customer looking to take advantage of the offer would do best to inquire with their local comic book shop as to how to best proceed. Alrighty then. There's the first of the two articles we'll be handling tonight. Going over tonight. Let's get to the second one there. All right, so the second article we're covering tonight is this one, of course. In smaller quotes here, Absolute Batman writer says comic book fans are tired of everything being quote connected to some giant ecosystem of TV, movies, a million different things. Again, this story we kind of also covered on from Bleeding Fool last night. They were talking about this and how independent creators are outplaying, as it were, Marvel and DC. So, article by Spencer McCauley, published, of course, January 6th, which is yesterday. Let's get into this. So, in giving a voice to the legions who are just done with the concept of, in smaller quotes, multimedia synergy, Absolute Batman scribe Scott Snyder says that according to his observations over the past year, one of the most consistent sentiments he's found among comic book readers was an absolute exhaustion with every issue, character, and even costume design being forcefully connected to whatever silver screen ambitions their respective publishers may have. Yeah, I think most people, when they want to read comics, want to read the comic universe, not necessarily. I mean, yeah, they can always put out a comic that is. They can put out like an Elseworld type comic, for example, for that revolves around the movies or the DC, the DCAU, MCU, all that, or DC, DCCU, MCU, But anyways, putting a bat-shaped bow on 2025 with a quote-unquote year in review edition of his ongoing newsletter, Snyder followed a brief sharing of his optimism towards DC's upcoming Next Level Publishing initiative and a look back on his favorite comics of the past 12 months by taking a beat to share his overall thoughts on the current state of the Western comic book industry. Quote, I got asked a lot by creators this year about what I thought of the market, unquote, he began. Quote, the thing I'm excited about with this market is that it feels like there are fans out there that are desperately hungry, whether they're new, whether they're returning, whether they've been there all along, for things that feel transgressive and dangerous and risky in their own. Above all, their own. They want to feel like they're getting on the ground floor of something that is only happening here. Doesn't feel like it's connected to some giant ecosystem of TV, movies, of a million different things. Unquote. Again, yeah, I mean that's kind of the thing when you're reading. You want to read the comic universe, not necessarily the movie universe. I mean, if you do want to read the movie universe, they can offer like an Elseworld type comic that focuses on the movie universe. Just as over the years they've put books out, Elseworld books out that that have covered like other media. Like for example, they've had Super Friends comics out before that have been based on the show, and even having a Super Friends comic that kind of bridged off from the TV show. They've had DCAU related comics. DC animated universe of the 90s that started with, of course, Batman the animated series and continued on with, of course, Superman the animated series, Zeta Project, Static Shock, Justice League Unlimited. So, Batman Beyond. There's another one I missed, but and they even made Batman Beyond a comic in its own right, and they did. And yeah, sometimes what would happen too with that too is sometimes they would have a character start out, let's say like Harley Quinn. I think was a good example of this, where she was created for the Batman series. Hold on a sec. Sorry, let me. I'll be right now. I've had this phone for a while now, and I just now realize that not only do I need to hit the do not disturb sign for the notifications, but I also need to mute the ringer too. Sometimes you just don't realize these things until something comes up. But anyways, yeah. So anyways, let's get back to the article here. I figure out what I'm doing here. Let's see. So where are we at here? Let me just. That looks like I'm on. So. Alrighty then. All right. All right. So there we go. We already read that paragraph. Just trying to. All right. So moving to offer insight as to the recent appetites of readers, the Dark Knight's death metal scribe further explained, quote, it feels like the MCU and Star Wars and a lot of other franchises took what we normally do in comics with multiple stories, multiple series tying together, and did that over the course of the last 15 years in all kinds of macro micro ways. And it feels like there's a cynicism um, right now about things that feel like they're part of a larger ecosystem in that way, that aren't being built right off the ground now, starting in a way that's organic and strange and new and dangerous and weird. Unquote there. Quote, and that's why the ultimate universe and the absolute universe feel different. And that's really exciting. There's new fans that are hungry. There's a whole discussion on social media, on TikTok, other platforms that don't normally engage with comics quite as dramatically as they have this year. That's a real energy, and I see it in the stores. I see it at conventions all over the world. Unquote. And it was as a result of this energy, Snyder then admitted, that he considered 2025 to be one of the most shocking, invigorating, energizing, inspiring times for me in my whole career. If not the most, if not the most, because it is the validation, honestly, of the thesis that I think a lot of us have had over the years when you take a risk and you try something that makes comics feel special and exciting and not safe, not going back to the things that we've done before, not trying to sort of give everybody just comfort food, people show up. Quote, and you can give them big, safe comfort food also in a lot of ways. And that's fun to do both at the same time. We can give you something that speaks to stories that you've loved in the past and repackage them to do classic kinds of stuff while also giving you brand new stuff. So he's kind of the idea of pushing the idea of wanting to give people a little bit of something old and new that we're. Quote, for a long time in economic anxiety moments like it is now, the inclination of corporate bosses was to go backward or to try and recapture what we did before and try to recapture fans that we had lost by trying to do the types of stories they had already read and liked. And I always had trouble with that. And my feeling is that to recapture those fans, you do something exciting and new. But I don't think there's a problem with doing something exciting and new in the format of classic epic in continuity storytelling. But it's kind of what I was talking. One of the things I was talking about yesterday too. It's like you can still, yes, you can. The episodic storytelling can still work. You just have to know how to do it. To this end, Snyder pointed Matt Fraction and Jorge Jimenez's ongoing Batman Volume 3 relaunch as an example of, quote, what we're trying to do with a lot of the continuing series at DC, unquote. As a book, quote, is new and fun, but it isn't trying to change the mold of what it's doing, unquote. Quote, it gets to a point with that story that you're going to see things that you've never seen before. But it's in the classic style, the same way Detective Comics is, right? And that's awesome. So you can do both, unquote. Drawing his Battlefield report to a close, Snyder ultimately asserted, quote, my point is it's a really fascinating and thrilling market, but it is a tough market also, unquote. All right, so there we go with that one. Let's see where we're at on time here. Let's see, we are now at 31 minutes. All right. So let's see. Well, I was gonna try to hit up about 52 minutes here. So, um, let me see. So, all right, I do need to step away from the computer one more time here, real quick, but I will be right back. And then when I get back, we'll probably get started on the wrestling wrap up. So let me go ahead and put some music on for you guys. And I'll be right back. I'm back now, so let's see. All right, so guess we're gonna go ahead and move on to, well, let's see. I'll save that story for later this week. But anyways, so let's look at the rest of, so let's take a look back at last night's, of course, NXT look, and also get ready to look ahead to tonight's Dynamite as well on the wrestling wrap up here. As quite a bit was going on last night's quite a bit was going on last night's NXT. As at the start of the show, of course, they initially were going to have the NXT Women's North American Title match open up the show, I believe, with Thea Hall defending against Blake Monroe until Blake attacked. Till Blake, of course, attacked Thea Hall before the match. It ended up being a situation where Ava, who's currently the NXT general manager, basically basically kicked Blake out of the building, banned her from the building. So then we get into, of course, we had Ricky Saints doing a promo, basically stating that whoever wins the title, whoever wins the NXT title later on in the night, he'll be going after him. The main event being Oba Femi defending the NXT championship against Javon Evans of TNA, the TNA X Division champion. But of course, before we get to all that, let's look at some of the other matches. So the show opened up with Tatum Paxley defeating Izzy Dane in a singles match at the beginning of the show. Catching her with her finisher, the graveyard drive, as she calls it. And later on in the evening, and supposedly that was supposed to conclude the feud between them. But what will happen later on in the evening will kind of might signal that they might be continuing the feud. But we'll get to that in a moment. Then after that match, as it was, women's were galore tonight, because the second match saw NXT Women's Champion JC Jane successfully retain the women's championship over Kendall Gray. Of course, she had help from her Fatal Attraction teammates of Fallon Henley and Lainey Reed. Fallon Henley, who's also the women's speed champion at the moment. But JC Jane was able to get the win on Kendall Gray. Knocking, of course, JC Jane knocking Ren Sinclair, who was in Kendall Gray's corner, off the apron, and then following, of course, her attack early in the evening, you had a segment in the back where Thea Hall, where basically Ava was trying to get Thea Hall to go get checked out medically after having been attacked by Blake Monroe, only for her to basically be screaming that, hey, I want to defend my title tonight. I want to prove to people that, and Ava wasn't sure she would let her go out there, but Jordan Grace, who's still with, and, we'll talk a little bit more about Jordan Grace in a moment here, as there's some moving and shaking going on, as it were. But Thea Hall, since Thea Hall was demanding that Ava try to get Blake back there, and she told him no, she's gone now. And Thea said, "Okay, fine. I'll defend it in an open challenge." And you had the entire NXT, just about the entire NXT locker room, all trying to get out to the ring to challenge Thea Hall for the title. And then you see Tatum Paxley come through with her chainsaw, and she's about to get in the ring before Izzy Dane and the Culling came out and took up the challenge, with Izzy Dane hitting a super prayer powerbomb from the second turnbuckle and getting the pin there. which could set up a potential matchup against could feed more into the feud between Dame and Paxley, as it were. Paxley looking to get a shot at the North American title, and of course now you know that Dame will probably try to use the title as a way of saying, "Well, you're not getting me. You said that things were done, so we're done." It's like that kind of thing. And then in the main event had Obafemi defending the NXT title over against the TNA X Division champion Leon Slater, in which Obafemi did in fact retain after delivering a pop-up powerbomb to Leon Slater. And then after the match, we go to a back and where you see Ava talking to some of the other NXT talent, saying that it's looking to be a good year coming up for 2026. As a number of stars have already been called up, including, of course, already called up to the main roster from NXT. Recently were Javon Evans, Trick Williams, and Jordan Grace was also just called up. And you have Robert Stone coming in telling, "Hey, did you see what happened in the ring?" And goes, "No." And then we go back and see that apparently Obafemi has vacated the NXT title. There's been some talk that they're looking to call up Oba to the main roster. There's talk that they're possibly going to call up Blake Monroe to the main roster, as particularly for SmackDown. Now, right now, it seems like all the talent has been going to Raw, furthering imbalancing the talent between the two. Furthering imbalancing the rosters in terms of talent pool, especially with SmackDown going to 3 hours now. They're wanting to, people are, a lot of fans are saying, "Hey, put some of this talent." But there's another concern that has been popping up too, with WWE now calling up a lot of the top talent from NXT. It might ultimately hurt NXT, because you still, even though you have people like Ricky Saints and Ethan Page and Shawn Spears, who of course have name recognition, have some star power, particularly Page. Well, all these guys also came back from AEW too. But there's concern that you might be hurting NXT in the short run, at least, because you're taking because there's also talk that they're possibly, and apparently this has been on their minds for a while. They've been talking also about JC Jane being brought up to the main roster. So there's a lot going on as we're heading. We're a few weeks away from WrestleMania. There's still a lot of speculation regarding Chris Jericho and what's going on with him. But with all that being said, so we're done with that portion with last night. So let's look ahead to tonight's Dynamite, seeing what's going down on. So on tonight's Dynamite, and last night's NXT, by the way, came from the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida, with Booker T and Vic Joseph on commentary. So on Dynamite tonight, coming from the Box Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, and Jim Ross on commentary, and MVP also chiming in. The night is set to open with a Continental title eliminator match. Shelton Benjamin will be trying to earn a shot at the Continental title, Jon Moxley. As is always the case in these eliminator matches, if the challenger can either outright win or survive the time limit, they earn a shot at whatever title they're challenging for. In this case, the Continental title. And as always with the Continental title matches, seconds are barred from ringside. Basically, come out one-on-one. So this should be something. So in a non-title match, Ring of Honor World Champion Bandito will be taking on one half of the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champion, Sammy Guevara. In six-man tag action, the demand of AEW National Champion Ricochet with the Gates of Agony of Bishop Khan and Toa Leona will be taking on Jack Perry and two mystery partners. So we'll wait and see how that all pans out. In women's action, former four-time AEW Women's World Champion Toni Storm set to take on Marina Shafir in a match that was set up last week after the two cross paths in the main event of last week's show. And in a lights out tag team match, Swerve Strickland and Adam Page, are the two former world champions, will team up to take on the Ops Hook and Powerhouse Hobbs. So that's all we got on the wrestling wrap up for you guys. So now with that being said, we're going to go ahead and take a look back at this date in Niche history. So today being Wednesday, January the 7th, 2026. Let's take a look back at this date in Niche history. So 2015, 1966. $1986 and 2006. All right. So first off, we're going to head back 60 years ago. As on this date, 60 years ago today, back in 1966. On this date, back in 1966, Lou Thesz loses the NWA World Heavyweight Championship to Gene Kiniski in the main event of a show in St. Louis. It is Thesz's last reign as NWA World Champion over a 29-year period, and he will be one of the final pre-World War II wrestlers to have held a specific major promotion world title, in parentheses, although not continuously, parentheses, well into the Vietnam War era. Basically meaning his career started back in the 30s and 40s, I believe, and went all well into the 70s. After losing several rematches, Thesz would continue to wrestle on a part-time basis and held his last significant championship, the Universal Wrestling Association World Heavyweight Championship in Mexico in 1977. So the UWA title that was established in 1975. Such legendary luchadors as Mil Mascaras, El Canek have held that title. UWA, you could argue, is kind of the precursor to AAA. But on this date, back in 1966, Gene Kiniski defeats Lou Thesz in what would basically be Lou Thesz's final NWA World title reign. All right. So, anyways, with that, get ready to move on to the next piece of Niche history here. We move ahead to the year 1986, 40 years ago today. And on this date in 1986, American screenwriter, children's author, and illustrator P.D. Eastman would pass away at the age of 76. Of course, he was known for doing work on Private Snafu and doing work for UPA. Let's see. From 1936 to 1941, Eastman worked at Walt Disney Productions in assistant animation, story, sketch, and production design. 41 to 42, he would be so. Basically, he was a veteran of the notable works that include Go Dog Go and Are You My Mother. He also did some work on, let's see, he was involved in he wrote the scripts and drew storyboards for Private Snafu series for the Army Navy Screen Magazine. And then from 1945 to 52, he worked for UPA as well as a writer and storyboard artist for Mr. Magoo. So on this date, he passed away at the age of 76, back in 1986. All right, so all right, so getting ready to move on to the next piece in each history then. As we will move ahead to the year 2006, as on this date in the year 2006, let's see, the anime Gonzo's Origin Spirits of the Past premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 2006, 20 years ago today. Origin Spirits of the Past, known in Japan as Silver-Haired Agito, is a 2006 Japanese animated science fiction film directed by Keiichi Sugiyama, written by Nana Shina and Naoko Kakimoto, and was produced by Gonzo. The film stars the voices of course, these are the Japanese voices of Ryo Katsuji, Aoi Miyazaki, Yuko Kodegawa, Masaru Hamaguchi, Toshikazu Fukawa, Kenichi Endo, and Ren Osugi. It premiered in Japan in January 2006 and premiered in the United States in September 2006 at the Fantastic Fest Film Festival in Austin, Texas. All right, now moving on to the last piece in each history, as it were. And we move ahead to the year 2015, which was, of course, 11 years ago today. On this date in 2015. 11 years ago today. The 130th issue of Alter Ego from Tomorrow's went on sale on this date back in 2015. It sold for $8.95, was 80 pages. All right, so with that being said, I thank everybody for being here tonight. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. We'll be back here with more Niche News tomorrow, of course. This Sunday, I'll be joined by Sabrina from Devil Flyer Momentum, as we'll be looking at comics that went on sale in July 1940. We'll be looking at books, I believe, that are coming from Lev Gleason. So, with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.